from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Welcome to another week of our series entitled Journey Through Time. On today's program, we're very, very privileged to be in the home of Susan B. Anthony, and we're going to have a conversation with her. And as our viewers know, that she was one of the most prominent women in the women's movement ever in history. Before I introduce Susan B. Anthony, I would like to say to you that she is being portrayed by Melinda Strobel. Ms. Strobel studied at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art and has a degree in theater from Willamette University. Her credits include, for example, Kate Keller in The Miracle Worker, and for 2 seasons she performed at the Georgia Renaissance Festival as Meg Freehart, who was a court feminist. Our guest in 1991 started studying and performing in this role as Susan B. Anthony. Ms. Anthony has extremely impressive credentials in the movement. First of all, I would indicate that she was an American pioneer of women's rights, a teacher, an assistant manager of the family farm. She was the co-founder in 1866 of the American Equal Rights Association. She also helped establish the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. She was arrested in 1872 for attempting to cast her vote under the 14th and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution. She served as president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association from 1892 to 1900. Susan B. Anthony was born in 1820 and died in 1906. As we come to the home of Susan B. Anthony, I have with me Janelle Burke and Steve Schenck, who will join today in enjoying your hospitality and asking you a number of questions. Ms. Anthony, thank you for allowing us to come to your parlor and have this discussion.
You are most welcome. In fact, we'll see if Mary can find some cookies or something.
Well, thank you. And we shall ask Janelle Burke to commence the questioning with you today.
All right.
Ms. Anthony, it's very much of a privilege to be here with you and to be able to ask you some questions. What were your formative years like? What kind of an education did a young woman like you have? And what kinds of things people who might have been influential in your life? Was there one person? Were there more than one person who was influential in forming your opinions and helping you to develop?
Most young women did not have any sort of education whatsoever. Now, my father was a very liberal man and felt that it was very important for girls as well as boys to have an education. So he brought a teacher into our home, and that teacher educated both my brothers and my sisters and I, as well as a few other children who lived in the area. And we were educated that way for quite some time, and when I was 16, my father sent myself and my older sister away to a seminary, and we were taught such wonderful things like how to have nice handwriting. I was once reproved from getting up on the desk in the schoolroom. I wasn't able to learn the things I wanted to learn about history or mathematics or things like that. So there's been a lot of things over my life that I have picked up along the way. A lot of novels that I have read, a lot of other people's brains that I have asked questions of. Your question about who was supportive of me, my family has all been very supportive of me. My father being a Quaker meant that I was raised in the Quaker church, and I had both a great aunt and a grandmother who were high seat Quakers, highly respected, and were able to speak out anything that they wanted to say, or that they felt was appropriate. In fact, my great aunt was so well known that for her ability to argue politics that men would drive for miles around to come and argue with her. So I had it early on an impression that women ought to have a chance to say speak their minds, and they ought to have a chance to be educated in terms of the things that were happening around them. my early years in terms of reform work were encouraged by the women in the movement, especially the Quaker women that I knew, by Lucretia and Lydia Mott and Mrs. Stanton and Amelia Bloomer and, oh goodness, lots and lots of other women. Plus my family were very supportive of me and what I did.
Did you travel much? Did you stay pretty close to home, or did you travel some? And where was home for you in those earliest years?
Well, I was born and raised in the Green Mountains, and we went through a few family farms and things as my father was into milling cotton, and then of course when the bottom fell out of the market, we had to sell everything, and then eventually bought our home in Rochester, which we lived at for quite a number of years. And in fact, my sister and my mother still live there.
Steve Shink.
Mr. Anthony, I wonder if you'd take just a few minutes and tell us what it's like to be a woman in your era. What kinds of problems do women have to contend with that women in the modern age no longer have to face? Not that all their problems are gone, by the way, but
yes,
they're different.
The difficulty is that almost any problem I might say that we faced is something that you could say, oh yes, well that is currently going on. So that is a difficult thing, but I'll try to give you some kind of indication of what happened. The education for women was not encouraged. It has been slow to come about. But for a number of years, women had no protection, say, from a drunken husband. They had no ability to hang on to the money that they had earned themselves, or no ability to say where and what would happen to their own children. Many years ago, this has since changed, but many years ago, a man could apprentice or will away a child, even one that wasn't born yet. So the woman often had no say in what was going to happen to her own children. We did not have the right to speak in our own defense in judicial matters. And on top of all that, we still had to pay taxes. So there was a great problem of a great disparity between our ability to be represented by the government and our support of the government. So the women, as I understand, in what year is that? 1996?
Yes,
is that
that's
correct? They have ability to usually pick and choose the career that they want. They have ability to earn money and hang on to that money. Now, I'm being told by people that there are not necessarily the abilities of women to make equal money as the men are making. So obviously there are still some things that we need to accomplish.
Ms. Anthony, you
Yes.
Gave your life to the movement, particularly one aspect of the women's movement. You had suitors and you chose not to marry, and would you take us through why you gave your life to this cause and why it was so important? You extended beyond yourself to all humankind and particularly the issues of women. Explain that commitment.
Well, I think mostly because no one else was doing it. I have several times thought it would be wonderful to retire from the work, and then when I look at the young girls coming up through the ranks, I see that none of them are suited in any way whatsoever to carry on the kinds of campaigns that I have been doing. So I continue to stay in the work because there seems to be none that are following. To me, it seemed like the greatest possible sin to bring a child into the world, especially a female child, that would continue in the path that I had continued in. She would have no say in what happened to her. She'd have no ability to choose her own career or to choose whether she wanted to be married or not married. So to me, that is part of the reason that I have continued to do what I am doing. There is no one else to do it, and I have to do it because it must be done.
People as yourself are pioneers, and you lay the groundwork for certain principles and ideas, and then future generations will build upon that. If you look at your life, which was mostly in the 1800s, 1820 to 1906, you have spent that life in one particular aspect of the women's movement. Later there would be many other components to this. Why did you focus mostly upon a campaign for trying to guarantee the right of women to vote?
Because it is the biggest issue. We have seen so many women choose some other minor issue. Oh, well, we want protection from drunken husbands. And the minute that they get that protection through whatever law that is passed, they stop working. Now, there is nothing that will stop a Congress or a legislative body from taking away any right that has been voted into a person without that person having the ability to vote them in or out of office. So without the ballot to back up their desires or their goals or any of these other rights they got, women's causes are lost. So that's the main reason why I feel it's very important to get the ballot for women. Just as we have done, we did it for the slaves when they were emancipated. Suddenly, all the men said, "Oh no! If you don't give them the right to vote, they'll easily be enslaved again." Well, for the same reason, in order to protect women's rights in any other circumstance of life, we must have the ballot.
So, Ms. Anthony, I hear you saying that
Yes.
That political power obviously comes through the vote, both being able to vote and to seek office.
Yes.
And without that, you cannot correct all of these other laws that you've indicated where women did not have the right to sue and they did not, really the husband owned the property and so forth. So you are indicating to us that this is going to be the answer to correcting a number of other problems?
Yes. Oh, yes. Now, obviously, you can, if a man has a ballot, he can always, a right to vote, he can always sell his vote. He doesn't sell the right to vote, but he has a potential to sell the vote. The same is possible for women as well. There are possibilities that women would not carry through on some of the things that have happened to them. You know, they get the right to vote and then maybe they won't go out and use it, or they won't put people into office that will make and control laws that help and encourage them. But we won't know what will happen until women get that power.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Janelle Berg.
I want to ask you about some of your experiences that you had. For example, when you attempted to vote, what happened? Why did you do it, and what happened when you were there? And how did you feel? Were you awfully scared?
No. I suppose you want more of an answer than
Yes.
that. I attempted to vote because several of the people in our movement said that, well, under the 14th Amendment, women, and the 15th Amendment, women have the right to vote. The 14th Amendment guarantees that every person in the United States is a citizen, and the 15th Amendment guarantees to every person who is a citizen the right to vote. Now, of course, the small fact that the word male is put into that amendment 3 different times didn't seem to be a concern at all to the people working on our reform movement. So it seemed to me a point that had to be challenged. We had been sent back a number of times by the legislature saying, oh, well, you know, go find something else to do with your time. And so this seemed another avenue and another possibility. So in 1872, I and about 11 other women went down to the polling place and attempted to cast a ballot. There were several women who were pushed back and kept out, but I was able to place my ballot in the polling box and was consequently arrested. And I got some rather unfortunate legal advice, and consequently, as I was placed before the judge and was able to not argue my case in the slightest jot because I was a woman, he proceeded to have me fined $100 and proceeded to throw the case out. I mean, we were trying so hard to have him give us an unfavorable ruling, and then we would appeal and see if we could push it a little higher up in the judicial system. But the legal advice I got encouraged me to say, oh, well, then I am guilty, and therefore that was the end of it. I never did pay the fine. But Virginia Minor carried her case all the way to the Supreme Court, and of course at that time the Supreme Court said, yes, this is how the amendments read. You cannot, as a female, vote under these laws, so the laws have to be changed. And we had to proceed to do exactly what we'd been doing all along, which was to gain petitions and present them to the legislature.
Well, it seems to me that you are very brave and very courageous. How did you Do you feel brave and courageous? Did you feel brave and courageous when you were standing up, marching, talking
I feel
up,
driven.
talking up to people that you probably were told you were out of your place?
Oh, yes, all the time, all the time. Oh, you're trying to be a man. Oh, how dreadful. No, we're trying to be women. We're trying to give women all the advantages that they should have under our society and under our culture, and give them the tools and the abilities to help better humanity, to help better society and government. And without those tools, any work that women do is lost. Therefore, all the struggles ongoing of the temperance movement, the minute women wanted to get into the temperance movement, men said, oh, well, this is not a fit place for them. But good heavens, if it's an unfit place for a woman, what a better place to put women into, to make it fit for them and for the rest of society. I know I'm babbling now, but I hope that answered some of your questions.
It did indeed.
Oh, good.
Steve Shink.
Miss Anthony,
Yes.
the protest at the ballot box is one good example of the techniques you use to push forward the movement for equal rights for women. What are some of the other things that you're doing to try to bring the problem to the attention of the American people?
Well, education is a large portion of that, and of course all the campaigns that we have done in all the territories and the states, especially in the West, all of those are geared for education. Yes, we do very much want to agitate the question, and yes, we do want the ballot, but until people are educated as to the issues, they have no way of knowing what it is that they're voting for. We saw this happen in Kansas. The first vote came up, and it was voted down 2-1 because primarily the men had no idea what it was that they were voting about. All they knew was that the tobacco lobby and the alcohol lobby didn't want women to have the right to vote, and they had more money and more influence, so they encouraged the men to say, oh, well, that's not a proper thing for your wives to have. So our education consists both in educating women about their need to have the ballot, and men who ultimately are going to have to decide the issue, that yes, indeed, their wives, their daughters, their sisters, and the multitude of women out there who have no other man watching out over them or for them, that they need that ballot for their own protection. So it's an educational type of process, and it will take a very long time, so we persist.
And where are your supporters and opponents coming from? Are women, for instance, joining the cause readily, or is that a difficult thing to
Yes.
persuade them to do?
Yes, it is. One instance that comes to mind immediately was I was in Colorado, and I walked into a little grocer's, and there was a man in there, and he asked me who I was and what I was doing. We began talking about the movement, and he was so excited. He said, yes, I agree with you. My wife should have the right to vote. So he sent me around to her house to talk to her, and I explained who I was and what I wanted, and no, she didn't want the right to vote. So in that situation, it was a very unnormal thing, but there was a case of the woman needing the education. Now, recently, Horace Greeley and I had another run-in. He was determined he was going to say, absolutely not. Women don't need the right to vote. All the best women I know don't vote. So we contacted his wife, and his wife went out with a petition, and she gathered signatures. And then, of course, when it was presented, it was handed to him as being, oh yes, all the best women you do know want the vote. He wasn't very happy with us, but anything it takes, whether it's with humor or drive, we will agitate and educate the populace as to what the issues behind this question.
Miss Anthony, you're very astute politically. You've tried the different avenues. When you're involved in such struggle, there are many avenues. You tried the courts, and yours was like a test case, or you were attempting to make it that by
yes.
trying to vote. The courts weren't friendly. You tried to go to the state legislatures, and most of those were not friendly. So your organizations that you were involved with and the other women you decided it would have to be through an amendment to the Constitution of the United
yes.
States. But not.
Yes.
Would you explain that movement to us? And as you do that, I would hope you would have an amendment to the process by indicating that in the West there was a more friendly attitude, or Wyoming, for example, where women were given the right to vote. No wonder it is called the equality state. Would you share that with us?
Goodness, that was a lot of information. Let's see if I can do it justice.
Yeah.
we have seen in the western states that as territories were formed and people wanted to create government, law and order in those areas, in those territories, that they needed specifically all the help of all the people. Now, what man could deny a right to vote to the woman who equally had worked side by side with him? She had, just as easily plowed the fields, tended to the children, helped build the home with her own hands. Obviously, as we saw in the West, the men needed the women great deal more than in the East that they think that they need them. So in order for the parties back then to create society, well, to create the government, they needed the help of all people. And if you want to control the government, you certainly must have all the people into your camp. And the best way to do that is to allow women, allow everyone you can think of the right to vote in your platform. And there were lots and lots of different parties back then in those areas, and they might be, the Democratic Party or the I don't know. Some of them were silly, always drink milk on Sunday, or never eat grain on a Wednesday party. I mean, just odd things that drew these people together. But that's how we are seeing women have the right to vote in those early areas, because they are being drawn in to help form the government for that particular territory. Then once they have their suffrage, they're proving themselves in terms of their municipal and civil elections, and then they come into their statehood in the United States with women's suffrage intact. So we've seen the ballot in the women having the right to vote in Wyoming, in Colorado, in Utah, Idaho. Idaho's number 4. That was a great encouragement to us. We have also seen just the reverse. Washington wanted to have women have the ballot. They had the vote. They came up for their statehood into the United States, and women's right to vote was taken away.
You really have a challenge ahead of you, because in your life so far you've not got an amendment to the Constitution.
Yes.
You said the other avenues had failed, but this was a really difficult one, isn't it? Because you need to propose an amendment 2/3 of the Congress, and
yes.
You're going to need 3/4 of the states.
Yes.
But with determination, it is your hope that, whether it's in your lifetime or not, Miss Anthony, that will happen through that process?
Yes, I am certainly hopeful. Part of this is back to the education of the parties. We are seeing, as we're seeing in a number of the Western states, that without a plank in their platform for suffrage, for women's suffrage, the question gets very little attention in any party at all. And of course, it's not very popular to include that. We certainly don't want people to vote us out of power. So the people who always try to agitate the question are the people who are not in power. Therefore, if the Democrats have control of the government and the Republicans want in, then they encourage the women's suffrage movement and things like that, because, this will make us popular and we'll get back into power. So it's always the one who's out of power who is helping us. But this education problem is severe. Without the party's backing, most men have no idea what the issues are at all. They're not given the kind of information. They're not given the endorsement by the party. So that ongoing education process, I think, is going to finally help sway this issue. Plus the fact that we're raising up a whole new generation of young men whose mothers have been in the cause from a very long time. And perhaps they will get into the Congress and help change the laws. So that's what I am hoping.
Janelle Berg.
You must have met some very interesting women in your travels. Can you share with us who are some of your closest friends? And do you feel a great sisterhood with them as you travel about the country and as you plan for your movement? Oh, yes.
There are so many. Just a few of names that spring to mind would be Lucretia and Lydia Mott, Mrs. Stanton, of course, Mrs. Bloomer.
What kinds of things did they do to help you?
Well, Mrs. Stanton mostly has done a lot of writing, and she's sort of stayed by my side when others have fallen away. Others have always sent me words of encouragement or help financially, or given me a kind home to stay in my travels through. And there are a vast network of homes all over the country of people who have hosted me. Charles Sumner and his wife, wonderful people, Mrs. Stopford. There are a great number. The younger women who are coming up would include Anna Howard Shaw and Carrie Chapman Catt and Rachel Avery. Just wonderful, beautiful, kind spirits. These women are just the most gracious people that I know.
And do you deal with women who are in all forms of life? Are you interested in those people who are working needlepoint, working in sewing shops?
Well, those are the women that Anna Dickinson is working most strongly for. And of course, I feel that it's the women who are in the factories who have the least amount of education in terms of why they need the vote, and are the ones who most need it, because most of the time they're working for their own survival. And of course, without the vote, they have no ability to encourage or force their employers to give them any more money so that they can raise themselves out of the poverty that they're in.
Now, I know that you feel strongly, and we're shortly running out of time, but I know that you feel strongly that until all are free, no one is free. Would you please speak to that and tell us how you feel about that?
Until all are free, no one is free. That's a wonderful statement. You want more?
Yes, I do.
Oh, well,
that's what you worked for, I take it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Equality of all people. And I do believe that until everyone has a voice in the laws by which they are governed, our society will never attain the heights that it can attain, that it is capable of. That women as a whole have the ability to raise the level of society, both morally and spiritually, educationally, to new and greater heights. That we could become such great human beings and such a great nation if we live by this principle of democracy, that all people are created equal and all have the say in what happens to them.
Susan B. Anthony, on behalf of our panel, we thank you for being in your home, and we're out of time, and it's been a wonderful conversation with you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for listening to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will join us again next week when we continue this series on Journey Through Time, and we'll interview another famous historical figure at that time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.